she starts absolutely losing her crap. He described a monster where the odd kid was sitting is now sitting a Bigfoot in the kid's clothes. Oh my God, what's going on? Oh my God, what is happening? My name is Amanda Stowers, and I started working for Expedition Bigfoot, the Sasquatch Museum in Cherry Log, Georgia, in 2019. And I initially went there as a witnesser. I am born and raised here in the mountains in North Georgia, and having had experiences with strange phenomenon, Bigfoot, and etc. in my life, and through family members and stuff. When I first saw that they were opening a Bigfoot museum in North Georgia, I was like, what in the world is this going to be? I was afraid it was going to be something hokey, something corny, there's something to make fun of this subject matter, just kind of making a play on the TV shows, more or less. But it turned out to be the exact opposite. It's very much factually based, very open to a lot of the phenomenon that goes along with the Bigfoot subject matter, whether it be, the flesh and blood, the woo, the whole shebang. And I shared my experience with the owner, David Bacara, and we kind of became Facebook friends that way and other small things. And I was in the position where I had left a job at the time I was working because I was having to help care for an elderly family member, my grandmother. And they happened to post a position open for the museum. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is like my dream job. This would be like the best thing ever. So I applied for it as it would be like a part-time thing so I could still help with my grandma and stuff. But I still, hey, like everybody, we need the income. And sure enough, I interviewed and got the job, and it has been amazing. Full disclosure, I during the pandemic, I did leave for a little while. My husband unfortunately lost his job during the pandemic, and we moved away for a couple of years. So I just started back with them again earlier last year when we moved back here to Georgia, which I am very blessed and very happy to be back somewhere that I love and enjoy, and people who love me for who I am and all my craziness.
Well, it sounds like an ideal position. I can imagine that would be just absolutely great fun. But you said that you were a witness to a Bigfoot. Does this mean that you had some form of an encounter with a Bigfoot?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I never had a visual sighting of one. I have heard one, and I can go into full detail. I'm sorry, I don't know why I'm stuttering. God, this isn't a live interview.
Just collect yourself and just think on what exactly happened. Kind of give us the full gambit of how that day was going and when and how and where all of this occurred.
Okay, so yeah, I didn't used to share my story a lot, of course, until I started working at the museum. And I used to keep it to myself, so thus I get a little, or used to, I should say, get a little nervous in sharing it because, you don't want to be the crazy girl who was already bullied in school for being a little odd to, now you're the crazy Bigfoot lady in high school, anyways. So I was probably, it was around 2001. My uncle had just remarried and he had a stepdaughter. And so my family has owned the land that he lives on for several generations. So there was, 100 acres of property, hay fields, mountain woods, streams. It's just a beautiful, beautiful piece of property. It's been in my family for many, many generations. So I say that because there's a tree on that piece of property. We always called it the carving tree. And that's where generations of people have carved their name on the tree, where there's their initials, their name, or anything. You can actually see as the tree is grown, as it goes up, you can see the different initials in it. And so, us being young teens and kids, we wanted to go and have our new cousin put her name on the tree because she's a part of the family now. So my brother and I and my new cousin, we all walked from where we were at with my father and my uncle down the through the field, past the creek and into the tree line a little bit where this tree was at. And I do apologize to your listeners or viewers as I talk with my hands. The tree grew up next to this giant rock overcrop that we see a lot here in the southern Appalachians. So you could actually see like a spot where like there's no vegetation or anything, where something would have nested there, whether it be a mountain lion, a bear, people, Bigfoot, all of it would be there. And the where people would carve their name up, you would have to go up on top of this rock crop, and then that was where people were carving their names in. And as it's looking down, the hill goes up behind you, up behind the rock crop and the tree, and then the creek is down below just a little bit. So where I was at the time, I had gone up onto the top of the rock and was adjusting my name on there, because where I saw where I did it before, it wasn't in there as deep as it should be to for the bark not to grow back. And we were doing things as teenagers do, carving names and being just country kids. And my brother was down below the crop. I keep calling it the crop. My brother was down below, and for whatever reason, at the time I didn't know. He's like, "Okay, we need to go, guys." And we're like, "No, that's all right. We'll go in a second." He's like, "No, we need to go like right now." And he starts walking. He flips his knife and starts walking back over towards the field. And I'm like, "Oh snap!" We're like I said, grew up in the woods. I'm thinking, he's just seen a bear. My dad's done said to watch out for cougars in the area because he's seen them. So we start going back that way really quick. And so I'm several feet behind my brother and my cousin, and whenever he gets to the tree line, he starts taking off running. So, like I said, being a few feet behind him, like, oh, snap, I better get going there. I don't want this bear or cougar or whatever to come and get me. As soon as I got to that tree line, the most god awful roar, scream, howl, whatever you want to call it, came through. And it was so loud that the birds in the hayfield, the hay was really tall. The birds flew up out of the hayfield, and it made me cover my ears, and I dropped almost to my knees as I'm running, and I nearly fall. And so we still take off, keep up running. And me being a little bit bigger, I was able to keep up or catch up to my brother. And I was like, "What is that? What is that? What is that?" We're all freaking out. And he's like, "I think it was freaking Bigfoot." Like, you're kidding, right? No. What the heck? So we get back over to my dad and my uncle, and they were running chainsaws, cutting firewood. So they didn't hear anything or see anything. They just knew us kids had something crazy run us out of the woods. My brother wouldn't really, say much. And until later that evening, then he started describing what it was. Apparently, this Bigfoot creature was up about 50 foot up in the woods behind me. So where I was at up on the rock, it was up the hill a little bit farther watching us. And he said that before he saw it, he started getting like, the whole hair standing up on the back of your neck kind of thing, a little bit of the stinky smell, all the classic Bigfoot stuff that you see. But he said he saw it, it was standing there with like the most perfectly structural posture, not, slouched or anything, but perfect posture, leaning out over the around the tree, just watching us. But he described red eyes, and the hair was kind of orange orangutangish in color. And he just got this ominous, awful feeling of like, "You guys don't need to be here. This is my area. What do you think you're doing?" And so we told my dad and everybody about it. My grandmother, we went over to her house later that evening because this was the property that she had grown up on. And she kind of giggled, was like, "Oh, you boys done, you girl, y'all." She said, "You kids done ran into the booger, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah, your great Uncle Herm always talked about that booger over there in the field. He would never go back over there after he seen it back in the 50s or so." And we had heard this story our whole life of, that there was boogers around. And at the time, we always just played the word off as, ghost, because, it is a really big Civil War area, lots of Native American folklore and hauntings and things like that. So we had assumed that maybe he had seen a ghost, because there's even rumors of a headless horse, not a headless horseman, but like a headless type ghost that haunts that general area. So we'd assumed it was that. We had no idea that it was a Sasquatch, is what he had seen. So, like, all of this information just kind of accumulated together at the same time. And like I said, we were just young teenagers. The internet was still kind of new for our area, anyways, at the time in 2001. So we went over to an aunt's house who had a computer and was looking up different stuff online about, Bigfoot and different descriptions and where to report it. So at the time, I was downstairs talking to my aunt, and my brother, who was only 12 at the time, he found, I think was the Gulf Coast BFRO, and made the report there. And several years later, I was able to find it again to see exactly what he wrote. And it's kind of interesting, coming from a 12-year-old boy, what he wrote on there. So, yeah, that's my main Bigfoot experience. I again, growing up here in the hills in southern Appalachia, you see things, you hear things, there are a lot of stuff that goes bump in the night around here. And until I started working again at Expedition Bigfoot, I it was like a suppressed memory, if you want to call it that. And it was something that I really kept to myself for a long time. I didn't even tell my husband about it until a few years ago, whenever it came back, and I started deciding to open up about it, because I had started hearing so many obscure stories about these creatures and other cryptids and paranormal phenomenon by working at Expedition Bigfoot, that it seemed like it was a lot more common for these quote unquote weird things to happen than just the quote, oh, it's just a big monkey kind of thing. So around the same time that my brother and I had the run in with the Sasquatch on the family property, my mom and dad's house was maybe 4, 5, 10 miles uh, through the woods as the crow flies, as we say. And my brothers and I, we all had a little place there next to the house where we played in the woods, had a little fort and stuff like that that country kids do. And us and all the neighbor kids were riding our bicycles up and down the driveway, because my mom and dad have a really long, steep driveway that it's fun to ride. Anyway, we were up in the woods, and it was fall. And I mentioned that because the leaves were on the ground and were just fresh. So they were really these bright oranges and browns and really pretty colors. And you could hear like squirrels and stuff jumping in the leaves and things. And the sun was really, really bright. And my brothers and the neighbor kids and stuff were down right there at the driveway on their bicycles. And for whatever reason, I hear this noise of something big and loud in the leaves, kind of coming up behind us. And so I turn real quick and I look, and in that split second, something laid down, and I call it the bearskin rug creature, because it laid down with its arms perfectly splayed out, head down, and mouth open like a bearskin rug. And like I said, all of this happened in just a split second. I'm looking at this thing, and I see this thing with mouth open, black eyes, just like marbles. You always see on the shark documentaries, they talk about how the eyes are dark and black, and I can't actually watch any like Discovery Channel stuff on that, because the eyes freak me out too bad. But that's exactly what they looked like. and the color of this thing matched the leaves on the ground. And what was the freakiest thing about it was where its arms are splayed out, it went behind two trees where you couldn't see this part of the arms. And from the waist back, I couldn't see anything. It was almost like it was invisible, or if it was like half blended or something. And I, in that split second of seeing this thing and going, am I actually seeing this? To the other kids going, hey Amanda, come on, let's go, which is very similar to the last time now that I think of it. I look at them, I look back, and this thing is gone. So I don't think much of it as you which is kind of strange when you people hear people see or experience things like this, but I myself, having experienced so many strange and paranormal aspects in my life, I just kind of filed it back. And honestly, I kind of forgot about it and kind of questioned, if it was just a weird dream that I remembered. And when I started working at Expedition Bigfoot, and I had several different people describe not necessarily that exact thing, but other strange paranormal things, all of a sudden that memory just came flashing back to me. And like, there was several days and weeks where I had trouble. Like if I wake up during the night, I would actually have trouble going back to sleep because I could still see that thing there, like staring back at me. It just freaked me out for a while.
So a
But
couple of questions about that, Amanda. And now, did you saw it? You saw it when it was standing, and then you saw it just flatten out on the ground.
I caught it mid fall, I guess, if you want to describe it that way, to where it landed out like this as I would turn my head. And when I actually, because I could see, I could hear the crumbling, something moving heavy, and it caused me to turn my head. And so in that split second, it was like it fell down, and I'm looking at it. It's
So you
probably
saw you
20 feet
saw it
away.
not you saw it before it totally flattened out. You saw it in movement.
I did not see it completely in movement. No, ma'am. I saw the cleanest and clearest visual that I remember of it was when it was laid out flat. But I
Okay,
did hear
so
it as it was approaching us. It's like something heavy was running through those leaves behind us.
so you heard it, and then when you turned around, it was already flat on the ground.
Correct.
Okay. Um, and you described what it looked like. About how long was that in your visual before you left?
Honestly, a few seconds. At that time, it felt like an eternity. As we hear a lot of Bigfoot and cryptid experiencers describe, just it was almost like time stopped. I'm looking at this thing, and I could hear them, Amanda, come on, let's go. And then, I turn and look back at them, and I realize, oh, they're right there. And I turn back and look at this thing, and it's like I said, not there anymore.
It
So I
wouldn't
don't
have
know if
had.
it phased out to where you couldn't see it, if it disappeared. I don't know exactly what happened with that.
Did you ever go look at that area again to see if there was any evidence there of a Bigfoot around?
Not necessarily, because I wasn't really thinking Bigfoot at the time for that particular incident. And the carving tree incident, as my brother and I refer to it, I never did. Like I said, we had kind of a odd home life during my teenage years. So I was really, if it wasn't summer, I was very active in extracurricular activities and stuff like that. And my dad was the only one who really went over there whenever would visit my uncle. But come to find out, my brother did actually go back over to that area where the carving tree is. Him and one of my other male cousins decided they were going to go hunt this thing. And they built a quote unquote hunting camp inside the barn there, where they actually took one of the old cattle horse stalls and boarded it all the way up. So it was like a little mini cabin inside of there. And they could cook and they could sleep and all this stuff in that. And so they camped out in there for several nights. And my brother said that when they would try to go back up to the tree area at night, because they wanted to shine, the light around and things, that as they were walking back over there, they would have this thing flank them, where you're walking, it's walking, you stop, it stops, kind of thing. And they never actually physically or saw it, but they could, hear whatever that was flanking them. And my brother retells um, that my cousin, who was there with him whenever they went to go back to sleep in the little hunting cabin, that my brother was asleep, but my cousin could hear something walking around them and sniffing at the cabin, the kind of sound smell of something sniffing around. So they didn't know if it was a bear or if it was the creature again.
Any tracks, any footprints at all that were visible around?
Not that they mentioned, no, ma'am, because I never went back to that area. I was a little too scared to even think about it.
I can understand. That would be a little scary, all right. Now, you said earlier that your brother had reported this, but he was only 12 years of age, and it was kind of an unusual way that he worded himself. Would you care to share kind of what he said?
Yeah, I'll be glad to. I actually looked that up earlier, so forgive me as I'm getting my phone out here. There it is. All right, so I'm just going to read it word for word
Okay.
as my brother typed it out in the file. It was from the Gulf Coast Bigfoot Research Organization. So my brother typed out, um, me, my sister, and our cousin were at our Uncle Eric's property. We were heading to the carving tree, which is a tree in the woods that the entire family has their name carved in it. Me and my sister Amanda were taking our new cousin, I'm going to leave her name omitted, to the tree to put her name on it. When we got there, we started carving our names into the tree. After a while, I started having this strange feeling that something was watching us. Since we have bears in the area, I thought that we had better leave. I started to walk away, then I turned around to tell Amanda and cousin to come on. As I did, I looked up the hill and saw what appeared to be a giant fur covered man, and it was only about 50 feet away. It was watching us. I turned to Amanda and cousin and said that we had better leave right now. I got out my pocket knife and opened it up just for protection. He quoted that because at the time, people were already starting to worry about, knives and guns and things like that in the world. It says, when we got out of the woods and reached the field, I closed up my knife and started to run as fast as I could. My sister and cousin, they all did the same. We ran back to Eric's truck and where my dad and everybody was hauling firewood. And then it says activities of witnesses. My brother described it stood about 8 feet tall. It had light brown hair all over it. It looked like a human face, except it had hair on it like a monkey's face. It was standing up in perfect posture. And it says description of the creature. There was a very weird smell, but I could barely smell it. It smelled like a roadkill skunk. And that's really all that there was to it in that, because that
Well,
was
that's interesting. Now, did you smell this? Did you smell
I
anything?
didn't. I didn't. And another strange thing about it that my just actually spoke to my brother about recently here over Christmas break is that, I've been retelling this story several times since having worked at Expedition Bigfoot. And I always remember the roar that was so loud that scared the birds and had me almost fall. My brother doesn't remember that. He says, I don't remember any sounds. I remember us running and everything, but I don't remember any sounds. I remember smelling it. I don't remember a smell that I could smell at the time. Like I said, that doesn't really. come to memory, but the sound that it made is one thing that just sticks out to me the most.
Do you remember discussing this with him after, right after the that incident at the carving tree incident?
Yeah, like I said, we ran back over directly afterwards to my dad and to my uncle, and again, they were knew us kids had seen something that had startled us so bad, and we just kind of talked about it. He described a Bigfoot, and I was like, oh my goodness, this really happened, because we'd heard stories about them and things like that, and now here apparently we just had one run us out of the woods. So other than that, we really didn't talk about it much more, other than we would share it with family members for the next couple of weeks. Again, where we would end up sharing it with the aunt that we used the computer to log on and make the report with.
Did you write down or journal anything about that incident after it happened?
I didn't. No, I wasn't one of those teenagers that kept a journal or anything. And other than the description thing that my brother happened to write through that reporting agency, that's the only written report we have of it at that time.
So that first incident where you heard the sound and your brother had the visual sighting and the smell, and then this other incident where the thing just flattened out on the ground. Have you had any other suspected Bigfoot encounters?
As far as Bigfoot goes, not necessarily. I have seen some other weird things in the woods. I've had several ghost encounters. I've been one of those people that gets weird premonitions about things. I'm very empathic, I guess. I've come to realize that here lately. Um, I seen a crazy thing that looked like a dinosaur once, and it looked like a pterodactyl. I actually interviewed some on a podcast recently for that, because I'd never shared that much before. So the more and more that I am opening up about some of these strange encounters and strange experiences that I've had, the more I'm realizing, I'm not the crazy person. The more there is other people out there like me who have seen and heard weird things like this. So I'm starting to try to be a lot more open about it, because
Well, I would
not only is
imagine,
it help. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry, I would imagine working at the museum, there's a lot of stories passed through there.
Oh my gracious, so many stories. People ask us all the time, it's like, well, how many stories do y'all get when you come in there? And like, we honestly get stories at least once, if not twice a week. Whether those are recent encounters, that's hit or miss. We have had several recent encounters that we've talked to in the last few weeks, but most of them are from people who are very similar to myself, who come in there, realize that the museum is not something there to make fun of the subject matter, but definitely more of a taking the subject matter seriously. And they'll come up to me a lot of times at the register, says, what do you think about this? Do you think these things are real? I'm like, yes, very. I've heard crazy things, I've seen crazy things, I've talked to too many people who've had encounters and experiences themselves, and I'll share a little bit with that, and then that person will usually end up like, well, I haven't told much of anybody, but back in the 70s or 80s, and then they'll go into great detail about their encounter or their experience with another cryptid creature, because we get more than just Bigfoot reports. I've taken several dogman reports. I've talked to somebody who secondhand heard about somebody seeing a Mothman type creature, um, water monsters, golem, aka rake type creature. So I've heard a lot of very crazy, very interesting stories from a lot of good, credible people too. People who have, as we hear all the time in the crypto world, people who have absolutely no reason to lie about these things or make these stories up. They have nothing to gain from it.
Absolutely. So you said there have been some recent reports in your area, without divulging, of course, names or anything of that sort. Is there anything you can share with us about that?
Um, yeah, I think so. So we had one person call I don't want to divulge the location, but I had one person call recently to call in to ask if we had had any other Bigfoot reports that have come in from that exact area, which is here in North Georgia. And I took the call and spoke to him and got all the details about it. And it was a full visual sighting at night as it came into the light of the porch of this person. And first they sounded a little skeptical, and the more that I talked to them, the lot calmer and more open the person became. And so I would take down that information and I would pass it along to our owner, head researcher, David Batera, and let him take over the report from there. And I've had another report recently out of our general area, not of a visual sighting, but of people finding evidence of Bigfoot habitation, where like the tree twistings that people describe, and seen several pictures of footprints. I've had several footprint pictures come in recently for the area, so it happens all the time.
I'm sure it does. So in the time that you've worked there, what was the most interesting or bizarre Bigfoot sighting that's been reported to you?
Uh, the one that comes to mind for me, one that I took personally, because I've heard several others that I've hearing from other employees as they're talking to people, or from David himself who's in there. But the one of myself was a very cool story. So as we're at the museum, we were wearing our logo T-shirt, so people know that we're employees. And if you're able to pull up a picture of our logo, on one side of it, it has the tribal mask of the Native American depictions of Sasquatch. And then on the other side is kind of just a basic sketch drawing of a Bigfoot. And the two ladies that came in was, chit chatting. They were already having a great time. It very much reminded me of me and my best friend when we first came into the museum for the first time. And we got talking in conversation as I'm introducing them to the museum and telling them what to look for as they're going through. And they pointed out my shirt, the logo on it, and they just said, I've seen one that looks almost identical to that thing. And they're pointing to the Bigfoot, the half of it that looks like the creature, and it has kind of like, not really dreadlocks. They described it as dreadlocks, hair coming off of it. They said that they were at a gathering in Colorado. I don't know, remember the exact location, but they were at a spiritual gathering, they called it, in Colorado. And they were around either a drum circle or something like that. Was there possibly alcohol and or drugs involved? I don't know. These ladies did not specify, nor is it my place to judge in that aspect as far as their testimony goes. But they described having a person, in quotes, bump up next to them. And as this person, a very tall male, bumps up next to them, they look at it, it looks at them, and it is a Sasquatch creature. But interesting thing about it is that it is wearing clothes. And we actually hear that a lot at the museum about these creatures wearing clothes. But they described it as it looking very haphazard, like it was just something that it just picked up off the ground, because it was like a business button-up shirt that was kind of half buttoned up. It was really muddy and gross, and the same thing with pants. But they said the hair on it, the face was very human like, but very animal like at the same time. And it was very, very tall. And they said that's what stood out so much when they saw the logo on my shirt, was that the hair coming off of it had like these little dreadlocks coming out, which is the same thing that they described this creature having. And they know that it was a creature because they said they were at the very back of it, the area of the party that they were in, and it had walked up behind them, bumped into them, looked at them, And they said it looked at him like a, yeah, you saw me. Yes, you did. That you're kind of look, and then walked on. And as it kept walking through the people, it transitioned more into a human form as it was going in. And the two friends looked at themselves like, did we just see what we just think we saw? And they kind of look over, and there's another guy standing right here beside them, mouth agape, which is like, and so all these three or four people right there just all saw the exact same thing of this creature transforming, walking out of the woods from its quote beast form into its human form. And so these ladies had, no reason to lie to me. And the one actually had to keep talking to them, was like, it's okay, you can talk about it. I'm like, and she's not going to make fun of you. You can talk about it. And I would encourage her to give me these details, because it's the small details in these stories that are where the little puzzle pieces start kind of clipping together. And so off the top of my head, that is definitely the most bizarre one that I've ever taken
Well, I can
as far
totally
as Bigfoot.
understand that. I've never heard that one before. Now, is this the only incident that you have heard of about a Sasquatch transitioning into a human looking form?
No, David, our owner, he has taken one that I know of, and one that he recounts quite often, of one here in North Georgia where we are at, of a paranormal experience. I'll just recount the story to you. So David describes a gentleman coming into the museum, and he was an older gentleman, so it was him, his wife, and grandchildren, older teenager grandchildren. They walked through the museum, come back out, and the grandfather comes up to David and says, "Hey, I have an encounter for you that you need to hear." And so, David starts talking to him, and he's as the grandpa starts talking, David's looking at the people around him, and he's noticing that the grandkids are standing there, the males especially are standing there, and with the arms crossed, going, "Yeah, I dare you to make fun of my grandpa while he's talking." And the gentleman recounts a story of himself. I'm assuming it was in the 70s, because they describe a what sounded like one of the fun hippie bands they had back then. They were going up to a mountain we have here called Telona Mountain, where you can go up and view a really pretty overlook kind of thing. And the gentleman recounts him inviting himself, his sister, some other friends, and this one obscure kid from high school that I guess kind of wanted to be part of the friend group, but was kind of this also obscure kid that people made fun of, or something to that effect. But the story goes that they were going up the mountain, and it's dark, and I'm assuming, yeah, the gentleman was driving, his sister was in the passenger seat, and then there was other people behind them in the other seats in the van. And as they're driving up, the sister is turning around and talking to him, and she starts absolutely losing her crap. And so is everybody else in the van. The gentleman is turning around, looking behind him, and he kind of sees, he described a monster at the time. And so he had sat in all this commotion. He had stopped the van, was opening up to get out of it because everybody's trying to bail out of this van. He hits the button to turn on the interior lights, and it turns on, and where the odd kid was sitting is now sitting a Bigfoot in the kid's clothes where that kid was at. And everybody's freaking out and bailing out of the van. But Bigfoot, the Bigfoot, is looking around like, "Oh my God, what's going on? Oh my God, what is happening?" And in that split second, as everybody is jumping out of the van, the kid turns back into, I'm assuming we want to describe it as his regular form, And he's closing and he's just going like, what's going on? Why is everybody freaking out? We were just having a good time. What's going on? So that's not the first time we've heard similar encounters to that. So I don't know if the kid didn't know that he had the ability to do that or didn't know it, or if he traded spots from one realm to another, if there was a shift in dimensions, whatever terminology you want to describe there. That was one of the most bizarre ones that David has taken, that he recounts quite often. And I know he's taken other reports of these creatures in human clothing as well. As far as them transitioning to human form, I don't know off the top of my head.
That is interesting. I haven't heard of Bigfoot doing that at all, but I have known of cases, having researched UFO material for a long time. I have known of cases where people see someone transition into a reptilian type of creature.
Yeah.
So, and back, they turn back into their normal natural self at
Mm-hmm.
a point too. But more than one incident has been reported to me of that's what this sounds like. It sounds very, very similar.
It does sound very similar. Yeah. I myself haven't taken any reports of that, but being, interested in the paranormal and cryptids and stuff, you hear lots of stories of that on the internet and in books and YouTube and things.
It's true. So, given all of these more unusual reports, as well as your own personal experiences with Bigfoot, what do you think they are?
That is a very interesting question. And I get asked that question quite often working at the museum. And like I said, this is just my personal opinions. This doesn't go with necessarily the opinions of others at the museum. When I'm working there, 90% of the time, I have to lean towards flesh and blood just because a lot of people aren't ready mentally for the more obscure stuff, the more that these creatures are most likely a spiritual being. They're either extraterrestrial, they're from another dimensions, all the other more paranormal theories to these things. I myself lean more towards the spiritual, uh, extra dimensional beings, just either from my own personal experiences and just from my own research, as far as reading books and witness testimonies and things like that. I've taken just my own discernment, and a lot of that also stems from my personal faith as a Christian. The whole Genesis 6 theory and a lot of other aspects to the paranormal that involve the apocryphal text, the Watchers, Book of Enoch, all that kind of stuff that you hear from different people.
Right, exactly. So, in your view of Bigfoot being a flesh and blood or not, because that's real interesting how it kind of interweaves in between a
It
lot of
does.
different realities. How much do you think that our own limited sense of perception plays into how we're interpreting all of this?
I believe it takes a huge part of our interpretation of this, because I think that you always hear the statistic that we only use 10% of our brains. So whether there's a lot of skepticism in that, I certainly think that there's a lot of it. I use the ghost theory a lot with describing these creatures. We're looking into the paranormal aspects of stuff. So if you have, say, myself, I pass away tonight or tomorrow, my spirit still lingers on and people see that spirit. Was I not at one time or am a physical being? And or people who can crap, I can't think of the word, where people can manifest themselves from one place to another. uh,
Teleport?
yeah, to either teleport. I can't think of the word in it now. It's driving me crazy. I'll message you. I'm gonna message you later with the name like later. But anyway, people who are able to have these, special abilities, he could teleport, telekinesis, um, make things levitate, things, just strange paranormal magical abilities that you want to call them. So if people can have these abilities, why can't these creatures too? If they're so much bigger than us, not only physically, so then you'd have a bigger brain and things like that. If these things are older than we are, would they not have more knowledge of some of these more paranormal things that we as humans, or they as the beings that they are, to be able to do more mysterious things?
Right, exactly. Well, what else can you tell us? I mean, you're around this subject day in, day out, so I'm sure you're just like full of all kinds of information that the rest of us may not be privy to. So, is there anything else you want to share?
Oh goodness. Like I said, I could go on for hours and hours with different stories that I hear from people all the time. The only thing I would really want to share with anybody is that if you have had an encounter with something obscure, whether it be Bigfoot, reptilians, all these other cryptids, Mothman, Dogman, all these silly names that they give them. I call them silly because it gives it a kind of a silly aspect to it that allows for people to make fun of it. And that's just coming from myself, who has been made fun of for different things. But I just want to say to these people, it's okay. Please, open up with those people, open up about it. You can share those experiences with like-minded people, and by doing so, you might actually find your people by opening up and sharing my experiences and sharing some of the more obscure thoughts that I have about the paranormal, about the spiritual realm, and religious aspects and involving those and everything. It's allowed me to make more friends with people who, have some of the same thoughts and same ideas that I do. Yes, there are people who make fun of it still, but that also is just part of life. And you just have to kind of learn to kick that to the side.
Exactly. I mean, this isn't for people who want to stay within a framework in their mind of just a real straight and narrow perception of
Mhm.
life, because there are some really strange things that happen in the world and we don't always have explanations for them.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, this world is a lot stranger than we think. And I heard a very, very interesting quote from someone the other day. And it says, yes, the world is stranger than we think, but it should not be strange to think. And I 100% believe that to be 100% true, and that we should all live our lives by that.
I think that's a wonderful, wonderful line. Yeah, I'm going to use that myself. That's so good. Well, I'm going to end our interview. Amanda, thank you so much for participating. Some really, really good information here. Some really different pieces of thought about this. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. I hope I did okay, and I
You did
apologize.
great. Yeah.
I am
Okay.
I stutter over myself sometimes when I lose my train derails, but thank you for inviting me on and for having me. And yeah, I just recently, I don't know if you want to throw that in or not, but yeah, I just recently made the Amanda the Bigfoot Lady stuff on social media because I'm working at the museum. People are coming in all the time wanting to share with me different, things that they've found. It's like, yeah, check out this footprint that I found, or this audio recording I have, and it's on their YouTube or it's on their TikTok or something where they have that file saved. And so it was just a lot easier for them to, hey, just share it with me, through social media, so that way I can listen to it later when I'm not at work, and maybe give feedback, or just save it with some of the other research that we have. And like I said, that was just a couple of weeks ago, and now all of a sudden everybody's reaching out to me, so I guess it's stuck as Amanda the Bigfoot Lady.